What is STEMdentity? Is it just the slightly cute combination of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and identity? Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's also who am I when I show up to work? What are the roles I want to have? What are the roles I need to have? I do science, I do engineering. I also do business development and sales. I teach, I mentor. Sometimes I'm basically an unlicensed therapist at work, right? And most of us are like that. Most of us have multiple roles that we take on in our STEM jobs. And also, it's easy to get kind of lost, kind of bogged down. Either there's too many roles that you feel like you need to take on, or you feel like you're not good at some of those roles, or some of those roles have been thrust upon you and you don't particularly want them, right? All these things swirling around that keep us from being our most creative, excited, interesting, and capable selves at work. So that's what this podcast is for. We're going to dive in, right, to different things. Is it your email inbox? Is it your limiting beliefs? Is it imposter syndrome dragging you down? What are those things that are keeping you from figuring out and living your best, most excited, most lit up STEM identity? Today's podcast episode, we're starting on ground zero. What if you don't even know? What if you don't know what your STEM identity is? Or what if you're in a job and you're like, yeah, I kind of like it, but it's not my favorite thing, and there's some things that could be better, and right? No worries. We've all been there. And most of us are going to continue to be there at some level, right? Most of us are going to continue to have little bits and pieces that we don't love. And what I want us to know and believe and think and trust and move towards is that we can start to shape jobs that fit us, jobs that let us be our best selves at work. That's what this podcast is for. Now, if you're like me and you like listening to podcasts when you're driving or on a dog walk or whatever, I got you. I am totally that person. I listen, I'm like, oh, these are really cool things. Oh, this person gave me like four cool tools. And then I get home, I go on to do my busy whatever, and I forget 3.5 of those tools, and I can kind of remember half a tool. And hey, half a tool is better than zero tools. So one, that's a win. But two, if you want to pull away just, the sheer essence of each episode, I am going to put out a quick little Google Docs, just notes. Here's the key things. You can grab it, you can download it, you can find the link in the show notes, should be right at the top there. Check it out if it's helpful. If it's not, no worries. Just listen, get away, whatever you can get away. Again, I'm so freaking excited you're here. I really hope this is helpful. Drop me a note. Let me know what work is working for you. Let me know what's not working for you. Let me know what you want to talk about, what you want to hear about. If there's guests on that you want to talk to, let's dive in. We got cool jobs. We do cool things. Our work should be magical. Welcome to STEMdentity. I'm your host, Anna Hodgshire. We work really hard and our jobs shouldn't suck. Let's dive in. Hi, welcome to STEMdentity. I'm really glad you're here. So, this is our first episode together. So, I wanted to dive into a little bit about what this podcast is going to be about, and then try to give you guys a few useful things to think about, some frameworks. I'm a big fan of frameworks. I find that for my life, frameworks are the things that I can then go off to be creative within, but keep me on track, keep me feeling like I'm making progress in my life and moving in the direction that I want to, which is really, my STEM identity. So why did I start this podcast? Honestly, this is what I wish I had 5, 10, 15 years ago, going all the way back to starting undergrad in 2009 and so forth, where I just really never quite knew what I wanted to do with myself when I grew up. Right. And that's what I want this episode today to be on. What if you don't know what your STEM identity is? What do you do? How can you start to figure out these things? I think this is a really deep topic. I'm sure I'm going to have more episodes around this, but I can start out today with some simple frameworks that we can think about that hopefully resonate with you, give you some tools moving forward. More broadly, this podcast, I feel like there are so many different careers, choices, things that you can do in STEM, right? I think it's really common, especially if you go to grad school, where I don't know if there's a single person, I'm sure there are a few, but most of us who go to grad school, including myself, probably spend at least some amount of that time being like, seems like my path is to go to grad school, get a postdoc, and then get a professor position, preferably tenure track, and then have a tenure track position that I stay in for the rest of my life. And even if you know intellectually, like that is not possible, there are not enough tenure track positions for everyone. That might not be interesting to you. That might seem stressful to you. You still might sort of feel like, but there's this pressure, the social pressure that that is what you do, especially again, if you're going to grad school. And if you don't go to grad school, then maybe you feel a little less constrained, but you have other pressures that you may or may not be aware of. So, in STEMdentity, more broadly, I'm going to have guests on who some of them have gone on to become a professor, and then some of them have gone on to do wildly different things or tried being a professor and decided it wasn't for them. And I'm really excited for us to hear those different perspectives because I think that's really important for me, talking to different people, understanding what are the options out there, what are the thought processes that led people to different things, really help me guide how I directed my life. Because when I left grad school, I did not know what I wanted to do. And I ended up having 5 jobs in 5 years. And I'll definitely have an episode or two diving into that, right? I think it's kind of interesting to think through, well, how did I get 5 jobs in 5 years, right? That's a pretty fast cycling through things. And what were the lessons that I learned from each job that might resonate with you? But the interesting thing about the 5 jobs in 5 years that I want to bring into today's episode is that it really gave me a appreciation for sampling. So that's the first framework I want to talk about, sampling. And then the other framework I want to talk about, I don't know if it has an official name. I've seen it described in different ways. Very charmingly, I found it being called Ikigai, which I believe is a Japanese concept that has been, kind of westernized. So for today, we'll call it the Ikigai framework as well. So today we're going to go into sampling and Ikigai. So sampling, what is sampling? What do I mean by that? Sampling is trying out different things. And really what I would like to say for sampling is that you are allowed to try something. And let's make that something, it could be a job, it could be a class, right? We'll dig into each of these with more details, but just the broad framework is try something. You are allowed to not like parts of it. You are also allowed to like parts of it. And you are allowed to walk away. And then the cycle can rinse and repeat, right? Try something, not like some parts of it, walk away, rinse and repeat. So let's walk into each of these further. Try something. I already mentioned, right? This could be a job, this could be a class. So if you're listening to this and you're in school, this might be a little easier for you, depending on your program, whether it's somewhat flexible or if it has a lot of rigor. Usually, most programs, whether they're at the graduate level or the undergraduate level, are going to provide a couple of what are they called? They're not flex courses. That's not quite the right term, but you know what I mean. The choose your own adventure courses. So that might be where you go, okay, I've chosen mechanical engineering as my degree. And I'm chugging along in the mechanical engineering framework. I don't actually know what the classes are that mechanical engineers take. I don't have a mechanical engineering background, but right, I'm sure there's some, syllabus that's a little bit universal from school to school. And maybe you mostly like it, but you're not sure. So that's where you can go out and try a new topic and see how it fits, right? It's just a semester. Hopefully, especially if you're in graduate school, you're doing research, so you're getting paid to go to school and you're not necessarily paying for your own classes. So this is a really low cost risk for you. If you're an undergraduate, it might be a slightly higher cost risk if you're paying for your own schooling, but if it counts towards your total degree load, then again, maybe a slightly lower risk because you had to get the credit hours anyways. In the real world, quote unquote, I know school is not the real world, but it's not the real world either. You know how it goes, right? School is kind of still this somewhat safe place for us to be in and grow and learn under the supervision of one or many people. So in the quote real world, trying something can look like thinking about a new job and that doesn't really look like what you've done either in school or in your current job and going for it. All right. So we have selected something to try. It's a class, it's a job. Jobs, obviously, you have to apply for, you have to interview for, etc. But let's say that we've gone ahead and we've gotten the job, and it's a little bit different than we look like than what we had before. And I'll give you an example from my life. So, my first thing I did out of grad school was indeed a postdoc. And for my graduate work, I had done very specific niche stuff. So my background training is on atmospheric science, really atmospheric chemistry specifically. And my graduate degree was, pretty specific on aerosols, which are particles in the air that can be liquids or solids, or anywhere between a liquid and solid, right? Phase changes, not phase changes, that's not the right word, but um, it's kind of like the continuum between water and peanut butter and something solid, right? Viscosity. As you can tell, I've been out of grad school for a while, and I don't actually think about what I did in grad school specifically, scientifically for my current job. So the terms sometimes escape me. All right, but so that was my grad school work. So aerosols in the air, outdoors. I did some work on wildfires. I did some work on remote locations, etc. And it was all modeling work. So I took data and I put it into models. And then for my postdoc, an opportunity came along that was kind of what felt like at the time a polar opposite to that. So it was on all gas phase compounds, so gases in the air, and it was on indoor environment. So moving from aerosols outdoors to gases indoors. So I'm like, okay, this is new. I'm going to try it. Great. Okay, the next part of the framework is you are allowed to not like parts of it, right? I think maybe there's a little bit of a pressure. I felt this pressure. Let me know if you felt this pressure of you're in science or engineering, mathematics, technology, and it's supposed to be this amazing, joyous journey of creativity. You're making these amazing discoveries that are going to impact the world. But really, you feel like either you're overwhelmed, maybe your days are basically just all emails and meetings, or you're in classes that you don't really like, or whatever that looks like, right? The day to day might not really feel very magical. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and to think about that and go, okay, I don't like parts of this job. Now, I don't think most people on earth have a job in which they like every single part of what they do, right? We all have things that we're not particularly good at. Paperwork is a bane of mine, but I don't think I'm ever going to escape paperwork, right? I run a research program, so I have contracting that I have to do, and it's very painful for me. And yet here I am. I'm still standing. I can make it through the painful parts of my jobs. But it's also important to go, hey, is this thing that I don't like, is it just kind of like this background thing, like, okay, contracting, it's going to come along sometimes that I can handle, or is it somewhat central to my job? So here's another example from my real life. So by the end of grad school, I will be honest, and I will talk about this again and again because I think it's really important to say these things out loud and to hear them again and again to sort of internalize, okay, it's all right to feel this way. When I ended grad school, I did not really like science. I was kind of just, I don't know, I was frustrated. I was not entranced. I was bored. I was annoyed. And I didn't really know why. And I'll be honest that I didn't figure out why until I started working with a therapist a couple years later on totally separate issues, but work came up and again and again and again. And we started to kind of unpack, all right, what are the things that like I'm really getting unhappy about? Because I felt guilty for being unhappy about them. Like, why do I just hate all of this? And then it made me feel like everything was bad, nothing was good. And one of the first breakthroughs I had for what do I not like about science was that the work that I was doing in grad school and then the work that I started doing in my postdoc, even though it was interesting and I liked the subject matter, I hated coding for 8 hours a day. I hated it. I'm not a great coder. It does not spark joy in me. It's honestly kind of frustrating. I'm old enough that this was before ChatGPT. So I couldn't just kind of have ChatGPT do all my coding for me. I was never really trained to become like an excellent coder in terms of structure and so forth. So everything was just sort of this cobbled together mess. And I didn't care enough to kind of go back and go, hey, I need to become, I need to train myself or take classes to become an excellent coder. I just sort of was like, well, this is good enough. It's getting me to the interesting bit, which is sort of the analysis of the data and the plotting of the data. But cleaning up data, coding 8 hours a day, day after day after day after day after day, just was not my jam. And I didn't really realize this, right? I was just sort of like, well, this is what I have been told science is for people who want to do like what I'm doing in my graduate degree and my postdoc. So I guess this is what it is. So either I hate science and I need to do something completely different, or I need to just suck it up and, you know, be okay with just hating what I'm doing. Those are not great options. So again, it's okay to not like parts of it. And it's actually really valuable to start to identify, hey, these are the specific parts I do not like about what I'm doing. Because then you can start to think, I wonder if there's jobs out there where I'm still in maybe the subject matter that I am interested in, or working with the types of people I like to work with, but I'm not doing the things I hate that are central to what I'm doing right now. So for me, it was coding 8 hours a day. For you, it might look like something else. That's the second part of the framework. So far we've done try something and we've gone through it's okay, you're allowed to not like parts of the thing you're trying. The next part is you are also allowed to like parts of it. And I'll add a corollary to this that is, especially if things are coming easily to you. I think this is another little hidden thing in science and engineering that you may or may not have realized about yourself. And it's taken me quite a while to kind of acknowledge out loud that maybe I have realized this about myself, but it's not necessarily a strength, which is I tended to go towards things that were really hard for me. And that ended up making me feel rather unhappy, as it turns out, right? I think it's important to stretch yourself, right? It's good to try things, but to intentionally choose things that are very difficult is definitely going to grind you down, especially if those difficult things you don't particularly like and they aren't necessarily getting much easier. So I would say it's really important to inventory, what you're doing at work and think about, okay, what are the parts I'm enjoying? And are some of these parts actually kind of coming easily to me, right? Am I pretty good at them? And looking around, maybe the people around me aren't as good at these things. So one of the things that I realized near the end of grad school that I was actually pretty good at relative to others was giving talks. And this has not always been the case. And I'm definitely going to do some episodes on this because I have thought a lot about how do you going to give an effective science talk? How can you engage your audience? And what is the value in all of that? So look for some episodes in the future on this, but I'll just briefly say that I can remember really clearly one of the highlights of my last year in grad school was going to a conference. I had, one of the typical like 12-minute talks with 3 minutes Q&A or whatever. It was on, my PhD thesis work. And in the audience, people were even coming into the room to see me talk. And, I don't know that it was because it was me or they just wanted to see the topic, right? I can't assign reasons for everyone walking in, but people were walking in, standing around on top of whoever was else already in the session, right? You know how that is. It's one of those conferences where they had overlapping sessions so people kind of could choose which room to go to. And I landed very well. I landed two jokes and I was so proud of myself, right? I was just like, man, like this feels good. This is fun. I like doing this and I'm not that bad at it, right? And I realized that maybe you feel uncomfortable about admitting you're good at things. And I have felt that way too in the past. But hey, it's good to know that you're good at certain things and it's good to find how can I foster that? How can I bring that more and more into what I'm doing? So you are allowed to like parts of what you do, and you are allowed to gravitate towards the things that you find coming more naturally to you, more easily to you, that perhaps others around you are not finding as easy or natural for them. Okay. And then the last part of the framework is you are allowed to walk away. Now, this is maybe the scariest part. So I think for school, this is where there's a there's an end to school, right? At some point, you get all the credits you need, you do all of the things you needed to do. If you're in grad school, you're getting a master's or a PhD, you have some things you have to get through, whether it's your defense, qualifying exams, etc. But at some point, you know that you're going to leave school. Once you reach the job market, this gets a little stickier and it also gets a lot scarier. And I completely can empathize with that, where, especially nowadays when being a scientist, so I'm in America, it's 2025 when I'm recording this, probably 2026 when you're listening to this or later. But it's been a rough year as a scientist. And I think we can all acknowledge that, right? I'm kind of a blend of a scientist and an engineer, so I'll refer to myself as both. I'll be honest, that my training is more science, but my current job is in a systems and engineering department. So I am still getting used to that new identity. It's a new identity for me. So walking away from a job, why is that scary? Well, because it's very uncertain out there. And I think walking away can look like different things. The most obvious and perhaps extreme example is Indeed deciding, I do not like the job that I am in, and I am going to quit this job and find a new job. You can also walk away in smaller ways by thinking through, okay, what do I not like about the current position I'm in? What do I like about the current position I'm in? You can start to try to vector yourself towards the things that you are good at and you like, right? And especially if you have a more supportive environment, your immediate boss is hopefully someone who is willing to help you out and wants to see you succeed. If that person is not a champion of you, they're not that interested in your success. Are there other people in your organization that you can talk to start vectoring yourself towards, what are you actually better at and more excited about? So there's ways that you might be able to move around within your current organization, your current position, but it might end up being that ultimately you need to start looking for a position that more better suits what you want to do. So being able to quit and start a new job. And that's where the kind of rinse and repeat comes in, right? So either within your organization, you've been able to revector yourself, or you found a new position. Perhaps you have lined up this position before you've handed up your 2 weeks notice. Perhaps you haven't. But then, now you're doing the new thing and evaluate, right? Look back upon your previous job, walk through, okay, what didn't I like? What did I like? Now you're trying something new. What do you like about this new thing? What do you not like about this new thing? And at what point do you need to try to walk away, either by again changing your role in the organization or changing to a new job? And I've done this a couple times in my career. No, let's see. Well, quite honestly, each position change after grad school, I have done this. So one job, the postdoc. Postdocs are fairly terminal as well, right? They're kind of assumed to be between 1 and 3 years on average, I'd say. I do know that there's some fields that they can be a lot longer, like perhaps the biological sciences, but for the more engineering type field that I'm in, they tended to be about 1 to 3 years. And I actually had the extreme fortune to already have an industry position lined up after my postdoc. So what I did was that I worked full time for my first year in my postdoc. And then I said, I want to do a transition period. So I'm about half time in my postdoc and half time in the industry position so that I'm wrapping up the postdoc work, getting my paper out, et cetera. And then, I went all in on the industry position. And in the industry position, I really liked certain things about it for a while, but other things just became untenable over time. One of them just being some of the management was just not a management team I wanted to work with over time. So I actually ended up quitting that job without having another job lined up. I had the ability to do that at that time due to my personal circumstances, but I know that that is not something that everyone is going to feel like they have the ability to do. And it was really scary to quit. And I was really fortunate to find a job incredibly quickly after that. But again, I totally understand this is a personal decision. You have to feel like you have the resource and so forth before you actually fully walk away from a job. So I've given you this framework. I've called it sampling, right? I'm calling it sampling because you're trying something, you're taking a little sample, and just like a sample at Costco, you might go, man, like I love the texture, but the flavor's a little wonky. And it's really easy to walk away from, a sample at Costco. You just toss it in the bin, you don't buy the product, or you do buy the product, depending on how you feel about it. Maybe you buy the product and you get home, you're like, holy crap, now I have, I don't know, 14 more. I don't really eat the samples at Costco. So I'm struggling with a real analogy. I guess they give out like energy drink samples, right? So now you have, 200 packets of energy drink and you're about 10 packets in and you realize, man, that was a mistake. Should not have bought the energy drink. And then you still have the option to kind of maybe slowly drink it over time, try to give it away, or just walk away in general. But I don't want you to feel like this, you're just in this cycle forever, right? Because, at some point, hopefully, you are moving towards things that you really like, and maybe you either find something that you can be happy within for a really long time, or at least several years before you make another move. So this is where the other framework that I wanted to talk about today comes in, this Ikigai framework or purpose framework, meaning, etc. And it's something of a Venn diagram. You don't have to do it as a Venn diagram. You can just kind of make lists. If you love Venn diagrams, make a Venn diagram. Whatever makes you happy. You can do this on pencil and paper. You can do this in your head. You can do this in software. I am going to suggest, if you are able to, if you have the time right now, go ahead and write these questions down with me and maybe scribble out a few ideas. You can hit pause. You can mute me. I'll probably be talking about this for a little while, so you can, turn the volume back up and be like, oh, yep, she's still talking about it. No worries. I'm going to keep doing my own thing. I'm going to walk you through with examples in case you're just like, I have zero thoughts at this point in time about what you're talking about. But so here's the framework. It is 3 or 4 questions, depending on how you want to look at it. I think the fourth one is maybe somewhat optional at this point in time, but definitely put it down if it feels good to you. So the first question is, what do I love? The next question is, what am I good at? Where the corollary here, I would say, is also what comes easily to me. But yeah, second question, what am I good at? And then the third question is, what does the world need? And then the fourth question, which you can decide to skip if this doesn't feel great to you at this point in time, is what can I be paid at? So what do I love? What am I good at? What does the world need? What can I be paid at? So I'll walk you through with just a couple of examples from my own life. I could dive into each of these for way too long, so I'm not going to do that. But what do I love? All right, what do I love? I live in Colorado and I love the mountains. I love my pets. I love talking to people. I love giving talks, writing these down. Other things I love. I love sleeping. Yep. And see, right? I'm choosing a lot of examples that are not obviously science related or monetizable or even something that the world needs, right? Have fun with this, right? Dig in, and you can always kind of cycle back and forth between the questions. So, loves, I've got my handwriting is terrible, so I can't even read half of this, but that's all right. I've got mountains, pets, talking to people, giving talks, sleeping, reading, editing. I actually find it really fun to edit other people's work. I like mentoring. I find that really fulfilling. I like challenging myself. Yep, challenging. That's a good one. Okay, that's a pretty good list. I might come back to this. We'll call that good for now. So the next one, what am I good at? Well, I am good at giving talks. I really enjoy it. I really put a lot of thought into it. What else am I good at? I've done a lot of music in my life, and that's actually something I love. So I'm gonna put that on the love column as well, music. So I've done a lot of music. I have been in bands. I make my own bad dance music. I play instruments. So that's a pretty, I don't know that I'm the best, but again, I'm trying to be, hey, Anna, you are good at things, so put them down. All right, so I'm good at music. And honestly, I'd say those two, I'm gonna go ahead and make a little side category for I'm actually pretty good at performing. That's really what those two things feel like to me. Music and giving talks. It's just a performance. Okay, what else am I good at? I think I am good at editing. My mother was an English teacher later in life, and she really hammered in some good editing skills into me. What else am I good at? Um, I'm good at structure. Man, I love having routine to my day. I love having, certain things that I just know are going to happen at a certain time. Really makes me habit happy. I can build habits really easily that way. Um, I am good at empathy. I don't know if that's like the way of putting that, but like I can listen to people and their struggles, and I feel like I do a good job trying to relate to that and provide some helpful framework. So we'll call that good for now. All right, what is the next one? What does the world need? Now, here we could be here forever and ever and ever, but I think that's why it's helpful that we started with what do I love and what am I good at, because perhaps you can sort of narrow down what does the world need, kind of using your answers for what do I love and what am I good at to help you think through this. So, based on the list that I've made, I have some things about performing and music and mountains and talking to people and empathy. And I would say the world needs, you know, honestly, scientists and engineers who can show up as themselves. I think that's really important. I think the world needs more collaboration and more empathy. I think the world needs not even collaboration, but like listening to another person's perspective and having the ability to put yourself in their shoes, even if you don't really agree with them, so that you can start to understand, okay, this is where this person is coming from. This is their values. These are their fears. These are why they don't like what you're talking about, what you do, because they feel threatened in this manner, right? That really, understanding why these stalemates maybe exist around big problems. I could go on and on. Um, but taking a step back, even before we get to the what can I be paid at, I think there's some themes coming out of here where I like to work with people, mentor. I like a little bit of that performance aspect. And then I feel like from my lens that the world could use a little bit more empathy, a little bit more, someone who's willing to sit there and kind of work through things. So this is where it actually became pretty obvious that something like a podcast could be one of the things that I do to help contribute to the world when I think about how I want to interact with my skills in STEM, is talking to scientists and engineers to help us all think through, how can we become better at some of these things so that then we can show up at the table calm, confident, capable, empathetic, able to talk to people who don't agree with us, and able to start to move the needle forward. Because again, here we are. I'm recording this in 2025. And this year has been very obvious in some ways about how unhappy so many people are and how little trust there is in science and engineering, how easily it is to get confused, when someone talks and says, well, I think blah 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 is bad, choose your own adventure, whatever you want to fill in blah 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 is, right? You can look at the Make America Healthy Again movement. You can look at other movements where people are saying a lot of things And they're saying it in a way that can resonate, often from a place from fear, unfortunately, with people who are not scientists and engineers. So for more of us to be able to show up and start talking about things in a very clear and calm and reassuring manner, to not move from fear, to not move from scarcity and lack, but instead to move from abundance and confidence, I think is going to really make a movement in the world. And I started this episode out with like, hey, what is STEM identity about? And I kind of gave you a little bit of a, hey, it's about this, a little bit about that. I didn't really tie it all together, but this is me kind of tying it all together, which is this is something that I think is really important and part of why I'm making this podcast. So that is my Aikido diagram. I didn't do what can I be paid at. I'll be honest that I prefer the first three questions for myself, and I feel like the fourth one can kind of fall out from that. But I do think that hopefully I'll give you lots of little insights into that fourth one, what can I be paid at, through this episode, through talking to guests who have different career paths, because you can start to, maybe you're aware of 15 different things you could do right now that's different from what you are doing if you aren't particularly in love with what you're doing at this moment in time, or you're a student, you need to know what you're going to do next or figure out what you're going to do next. So I think that question will start to become more clear over time. But definitely, if that question feels important to you right now, you can start to write it out. I am old enough that I do not, right? I don't really gravitate towards things like ChatGPT, AI for my brainstorming, but I'm sure that if that's kind of already in your workflow, and I know that people listening to this, some of you might be older than me, and you're like, hey, I use ChatGPT all the time, Anna. That's a you thing. Totally understand it. I like to do the typical middle-aged millennial thing where I joke about my age when really I'm not that old, I'm not that young. I'm 34, so take of it as you will. Either that's old, young, or basically neutral to you, right? Um, but anyways, point is I don't use ChatGPT or an AI for my brainstorming, but you could definitely, if that's in your workflow, talk to your AI of choice through some of these questions. Hopefully, it can also give you some helpful ideas, especially around the what can I be paid at example. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. I want to give you a couple takeaways, and I want to give you what I call a learn and move your feet, right? I am definitely the worst at. I love listening to podcasts. I do it all the time. And then maybe I'm doing it while I'm walking the dog or whatever, and the podcast host gives, and maybe their guest gives, 10, 15, 20 cool things to think about. And then I kind of walk away and I'm like, yeah, okay, that was a lot of things to think about. And I don't really know how to integrate those many things into my day to day, into my life. So, probably something sticks or, lurks in the back of my head and it pops out when it needs to. But I'm hopefully going to give you a couple things that you can do a little bit more in real time to integrate some of what we talked about today. So I would say for my takeaways, it's okay to not know what you want to do right now. You might feel like there's some expectation or pressure, whether that's something you're putting on yourself, maybe it's your family putting on you. Hey, what are you gonna do when you graduate? Hey, what are you gonna do when you finish this postdoc? Hey, I've noticed that, right, whatever the questions are, it's okay. Those external expectations and pressures, they are not you. They do not define you, and it's okay to just figure out how to shrug them off. And we'll definitely have more episodes on, how do you get rid of some of those external pressures or turn them down in your head so that more of you can come through. Another big takeaway is that it's really okay to keep moving towards what you enjoy and what comes easily towards you. Your work does not have to be an uphill grind every day for the rest of your life. And in fact, I would really love it if it was not, because it's going to be super hard to show up as your best self, your most empathetic, curious, excited self if things are just a grind. You're grinding, 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 grinding all the time. So what do you love and what is coming easily to you? And then third takeaway, I'd say, I gave you two frameworks. First one, sampling. Second one, Ikigai. So sampling, you are allowed to try something, not like parts of it, like parts of it, walk away. Ikigai, right? This is the what do I love? What am I good at? And what does the world need? And what can I be paid at? You can revisit these frameworks at any time, especially during periods of transition or uncertainty, right? Whether that transition is it's the end of a semester, or it's the end of a job, or you're coming up to a point where you feel like you need to start looking for a new job, or uncertainty. I know there's a lot of uncertainty this year. It's probably not going to get a ton better over the next couple of years, depending on what industry you're actually in or what organization or type of organization you're in. So to be kind of constantly thinking about these things just in the back of your mind can be really helpful. I will say that for the Ikigai diagram, the what do you love, what are you good at, what do you need? I did not realize, honestly, that I liked giving talks and working with people until I literally wrote this out, because I am a little bit more introverted. So I kind of assumed, well, I probably don't love that. But then, in the context of my job, I'm like, I actually kind of like it. There's a little bit of a performance aspect to it. There's a little bit of sometimes I make really good connections when I'm talking out loud. I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that before. Cool. Right? So writing these things down is actually incredibly valuable depending on how your brain works. Definitely worked for how my brain works. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do to wrap this out is this learn and move your feet. So this, I'm going to say, is the one simple thing that you can start to do right away, whether you write it down or not, is just to start to notice what you do like and try to be granular. Maybe you're in a position where you don't really like what you're doing, or you do really like what you're doing. Either way, try to find like those little micro aspects. Hey, I really like working with this type of person, or this mentor is really great, or I'm really good at mentoring this type of person, but not that type of person. Or I enjoy giving talks, or I really hate giving talks, but I'm not so bad about teaching. There's something about that framework that I'm okay to stand up in front of a class and teach, especially when I have, my notes that are really well structured, whatever it is, right? So learn and move your feet, start to notice what you do like. And then as a bonus, this isn't really a bonus, I'm going to do this every time. I love music. It makes me so freaking happy. And I want to give you guys a little song of the week. So my song of the week this week is a song called Blunder by Inna True. And I apologize if I mispronounced that. I also apologize if I was mispronouncing the Ikigai. I did look it up on YouTube. I listened to that guy who's like, my name is Julian. This is a terrible imitation. Oh my gosh. But anyways, this is how you pronounce difficult words, right? He talks really slow and really funny. So that's how he said it. I'm trying my best. But Blunder by Inna True, I'll try to link it in the show notes if I can. Depending on the platform, it may or may not work. But it's a super catchy little song. It's super fun, very dancey. Check it out. Maybe dance around a little bit, right? Shake things out of your body. I really appreciate you listening to this. I'm excited you're here. We'll be back soon with more, and we'll just keep learning together and keep honing and figuring out what are our STEM identities? How can we show up to be the best us? These things matter. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening for so long. You're awesome. I appreciate it. If you want to hang out on social, I'm at STEMdenity on Instagram. If you enjoyed the music, also, that was me. I'm at XSS on Instagram. I'll link this all in the show notes. And if you're listening and you're thinking, hey, I'm building up my team, Anna could be a good team member of people to support me directly, please reach out. I've got a free 30-minute intro work audit call that we can dive into some of your top work problems, get some actionable items, figure out, paths forward, and talk about whether or not we're a good fit long-term for one-on-one coaching. So check all those links out in the show notes, and I'll see you next week.